Wouldn't you like to write a story? Don't you wish that you knew how you could be a famous author? So listen up and find out how. Wouldn't you like to paint a picture of anything from A to Z? You could be an illustrator if you can draw what you can see.
Hi, my name is Liz Shanks and I'd like to welcome you to Penguin Story Time. Today our book is The Duchess of Whimsy. Text by Randall de Sève and illustrations by her husband, Peter de Sève. The reason that I chose this book, aside from the wonderful illustrations, is because it has a great lesson in that sometimes we tend to judge things by exteriors, what the outside of something looks like. I'm sure you've heard that phrase, never judge a book by its cover. Sometimes we look at something and we say, that's not very appealing to me. But sometimes when we delve deeper, we find out that that is not at all what we thought it was from the outset. And that's the predicament that the Duchess of Whimsy finds herself in our story today. She has a very important decision to make, and that decision is to find a husband. And the whole word whimsy means unpredictability. She's a very unpredictable young lady. And that figures into her choice of a husband. Who is it going to be? How is she going to judge him? Is she going to judge him by her heart or by her head? The Duchess of Whimsy invites you to a soiree, a most unusual party, with some most unusual guests. The Duchess of Whimsy was known throughout the land for her extravagant soirees, her elaborate attire, that means her dress, her uncommon conversation, and her most peculiar pets and acquaintances. To the Duchess, the Earl of Norm was as normal as they come. He wore ordinary clothes, he walked an ordinary dog, and discussed with great seriousness ordinary things. He discussed the kingdom's rutted roads, the manor's nesting birds, and the rain, or lack thereof, even if nobody was listening. The Duchess, on the other hand, was the life of the party. The Earl was, let's just say that merrymaking carried on in spite of him. Why was the Earl even at the Duchess's soirees? I'll tell you. Because her father, the king, made her invite the Earl. Their kingdoms needed to be friends. And because the Earl loved the Duchess, he loved her lively stories, he loved her wild apparel, that means her clothes. Simply put, he loved her joie de vivre, her love of life. The Earl of Norm went to absurd lengths to impress the Duchess of Whimsy. One evening he took her to a party with a giraffe borrowed from the royal zoo. It ate the foliage off of all the ladies' hats and had a go at the drawing room wallpaper before the manor's pest control staff stepped in. The Earl of Norm composed sweet, sugary poetry, comparing the Duchess to a squid, a platypus, and a penguin. And he recited it before the astounded audience of giggling guests. The Earl even went so far as to arrive one evening in a brightly brocaded cape borrowed from his flamboyant twin brother, Nigel, but it did not suit him at all. The Duchess of Whimsy could not bear the Earl's silly attempts to win her attention. Still, way too ordinary, she said to her father. "Our kingdoms need to be friends," said the king. One evening, the Duchess of Whimsy invited her usual guests for supper, when suddenly the cook took ill. Panic reigned. What were they all going to eat? Out came the cookbooks, out came the chef's hat, out came the giant bowls and the spoons, and everyone swung into action. The Marchesa of Charisma made truffle canapes, but first she had to sniff out the truffles in the forest with a pig. The Shah of Huzzah made a watercress salad with pickled quail eggs, but first he had to find the quail and snatch the eggs. The Duke of Dreams made a velvet midnight cake topped with an entire galaxy of spun sugar stars. But first, he had to learn how to spin sugar. The Earl of Norm, he had no knack for cooking. And by now he had no desire to try, so he whipped up the only thing that he knew how to do: a grilled cheese sandwich and a glass of milk. And he sat down, quite quietly, to eat. Figures, thought the Duchess. But then she took another look at his plate. His sandwich looked so scrumptious. His milk looked so refreshing. How could something so ordinary look so good? The Earl noticed the Duchess staring at his sandwich, and of course, being a polite gentleman, he offered her a bite. For a moment, she studied the sandwich. Its golden crusty bread, its glistening melted cheese. And then, without further delay, she took a bite. It was delicious, it was delectable, it was divine. Then, while her other guests were still toiling away in the kitchen, the Duchess of Whimsy and the Earl of Norm got to talking. It turned out that the Earl could actually tell a good joke. He liked bright colors, and he was eager to learn how to wear them. His dog had even been bravely rescued from a traveling circus. It turned out the Duchess, she liked quiet walks in the woods and sitting by the frog pond alone at twilight. She especially liked to hear spring peepers sing. Once the Earl got to know the Duchess, he liked her even more. And once the Duchess got to know the Earl, she liked him too. Together, that night, the Earl and the Duchess enjoyed the sumptuous feast finally laid out by all her exhausted guests. And forever after, they spent their evenings together enjoying each other. It turned out that the Duchess of Whimsy and the Earl of Norm found each other to be simply extraordinary. They each had an image of what the other one was supposed to be like. The Earl of Norm. That sounds quite boring, doesn't it? Norm, normal. And Whimsy, she's unpredictable. So normal and unpredictable, when you put them together, they don't seem like they would blend very well, do they? But what happens? They start to get to know each other. They start not to judge each other by what? By surface. How often do we, how often do you, how often do I judge each other by the surface of what we see? I tend to do that sometimes. I found that I will look at a person and I will say, maybe that's not somebody that I would find so interesting. But then, once I get to talk to them and get to know them better, I find that they're quite interesting and they have an awful lot to say, and they wind up being a very good friend of mine. Now, in this case, with the Duchess of Whimsy, they not only get to know each other very well, they come to be husband and wife. So I think that's a good lesson for all of us. You know the phrase that Mrs. Shanks used at the very beginning of the story, never judge a book by its cover? That's a good lesson for all of us to learn. Because if the Duchess of Whimsy had judged the Earl of Norm from the get-go, do you think they ever would have ended up together? Probably not. Probably not. I want to thank you boys and girls and our girls here in the Tea Party Room for joining us for this episode of Penguin Storytime featuring The Duchess of Whimsy by Randall de Sève and Peter de Sève. Hi, my name is Liz Shanks, and I am the host of Penguin Storytime. As summer approaches, you are going to have lots more leisure time, and you will have the opportunity for your imagination to take you on lots of journeys via a book. Remember, a book is just a book until you open it, pick it up, and bring it to life. So have lots of adventures, reading lots of books this summer. You'll be glad you did.